and McCann.
Greetings. Welcome to Wake the Dead. Today we have returning guest, Miss Carrie Olaje. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for joining us again on Wake the Dead. You are a returning guest. The first two episodes were extremely informative and very helpful for my understanding, and I'm assuming for the listeners as well. I received many emails, especially about the Hunter Tracker episode 90 of Wake the Dead that we've done, because we were able to zero in on a piece of information that we haven't, no one really has ever talked about, the plans of the New World Order. And people focus on the abuse and the mind control and the immorality of it, but we were actually able to look at the function of what they were planning to do, and that helped us really understand what their future entails. It's not just Agenda 21. What's that?
Oh, I just said, yeah, the purpose of Sleeper Soldiers, essentially, like the purpose of the trauma programming.
Right. The end result, the super soldier, as you know, as well as the sex slave beta sex kitten, all of these, it requires sexual abuse and trauma to create these slaves, mind-controlled slaves. And
Yeah.
I've talked about it a lot on my shows, and we've had very informative conversations. The first one that we did, episode 88, we spoke about the unfolding of the memories and your experience of having these memories and surviving. We thank you so much for sharing with us, and I'm delighted to have you here again. Thank you so much. Today, we are going to be speaking. There's a little delay, I guess, on the audio, but we'll try to work with it, because we use freeware and it doesn't always work as good as Zoom. So anyway, please bear with us. Okay. So the phenomenon that we're talking about today, or the practice, is a huge part of your life and your abuse. And that is pornography, child pornography, ritual abuse, pornography, and snuff porn. Your story started with your story starts with your dad using pornography as he abused you. Is that right?
Yeah. At least that was always the first memories that I had of sexual abuse with my father, is that he would usually be, either like masturbating, pleasuring himself, or, abusing me while watching snuff pornography, which, for, people that aren't totally aware, of like what that is, it's typically going to be like a porn that's not always going to be child based. Sometimes it's going to be animals, sometimes it's going to be adults, but regardless, like my dad's favorite was always children, from like my memories, essentially. So it was both snuff pornography and child pornography. But essentially, it's always going to be the victim, not just being sexually abused, but being tortured one way or another, and a lot of times killed at the end of it. Not always, but a lot of times that is like, or at least like a simulation. There's a lot of times like where in trauma programming, even like allow someone to expire, and then we'll, essentially bring them back, and that's another really great way to create a dissociative split, for one, because of the level of trauma that the brain goes through, but then also, I was going to say it leads to, I think, I was going to say one survivor was bringing it up as an experience of having real love, for your abuser, because they bring you back to life, essentially, so it's like, that's kind of like what you had mentioned before, and what I kind of wanted to go into some of today is just having an understanding of, like, some people have a hard time understanding, like, that there's a single motivation for these kinds of things that we're talking about today. And like, what I kind of want to show is that there's not just one motivation. Like, most of the time these acts have multiple motivations, essentially, what is, I was going to say, I mean, what can they amount to, it's like, I mean, it's killing two birds with one stone or something,
Right.
like that. Essentially, the byproduct of this abuse event is going to be a lot of different things for the different players in the event. The victim, if they're being traumatized, like I had just mentioned, with being brought back to life, you now have, some trauma that you can use in that victim, essentially, to like mold a new dissociative alter to whatever your needs are, essentially. And a lot of times those needs with that kind of stuff is like perpetrator loyalty, and kind of alters that are willing to do anything for their rescuer. Like my own experience, like I had mentioned before, was my main handler, that a lot of my abuse had been geared towards, catering me towards his fetishes, which were for violence and everything. Essentially was, him rescuing me from like being gang raped, and then proceeding to rape me. But then it's like, fuck to death. Like, what, that kind of image for a little kid, when it seems very real and like a very real potential. And now you have this other person, who comes and swoops in and saves you. Like, what the fuck? It's hard not to see how you don't get parts in these kids, these victims, essentially are loyal to the abusers. So you'll have, like I said, a lot of different like reasons that they do this stuff. The fact that now anyone who's been involved in the production of it, when it comes to the adult side, has now been compromised from like a legal standpoint. Like,
Right.
They now know that they have photographic evidence, video evidence of them doing the worst shit imaginable, and that there ain't no way coming back from that shit if that leaks. Like, now the crime syndicate, whichever one you're dealing with, whether it's like a cult family, crime syndicate, or whether it's like one that's infiltrated from like the US military, or whether it's some mob mafia stuff, regardless, it's like they go through these same mechanisms, not just to traumatize the kids and have the slaves, but also to then bring more and more people into their network that they can then pull the strings on, because they have this dirt over them. And that is another thing that was my experience,
Right.
like I had mentioned before, that I had been used in what were essentially like gang rapes, either orally or, like a full on like gang rape with like, 4 different dudes. It was always military guys. And it was almost like I could see the situation that like my own father had probably been in prior to my birth, young military guy who's essentially been, and the thing is like, I'm not giving these guys a pass, because I don't know about any of you, but I couldn't get peer pressured into, like letting like a 5-year-old give me a blowjob. Like, I'm just saying, like,
Yeah,
it's something
like
that most
functionally, like my anatomy wouldn't work. Like, it wouldn't get
that's what I'm saying. Like,
aroused.
most people would be like pushing this child off and being like, "Oh my god, who are your parents? What is wrong with you? Like, let's get you help." Like,
Right.
it wouldn't be like, "Well, I just couldn't help it. She was all over me."
Yeah. God.
It's ridiculous.
Totally.
So like I said, so in these scenarios, you're both getting, what is essentially a porn film, a porn film of a little girl dressed as a princess, like pretending to have a birthday party, all innocent, and then, being essentially a prostitute, to three young, like, military guys, essentially, on a couch. Or the same for, like, four dudes in a bed, but this time, a different incident, obviously, like, where there was more, like, drugging and stuff like that involved. Less performance, essentially, on the little child part, and everything, but still, it's like, it's, even more traumatic, obviously.
Right.
So, but regardless, it's like that, just between those two incidents, that's 6, 7 different guys, other than, my own father, who was already a part of the organization. And
Right.
I often refer to him as, like, Shmuel, till I release names, who is, like, the beta trainer, who basically trained me to do most of the sexual acts as a child, via his daughter, who had been trained by him for a long time. That, that's just in those two incidents alone, like, that's like, that's 10, 11, I lost count.
Exactly.
Sorry, but,
It's innumerable.
that's, like,
It's like infinity
that,
almost. It seems as though everybody that works for the government or the military must have been in one of those situations. I mean, the amount of, because I
well,
mean, the way that, I mean, there's
I
so
think it's an
much
abusive relationship.
digital, there's so much digital porn, like digital child, online, that one of the latest judges to the court, the woman who can't define a woman, she in her past has let people that were found with huge amounts of child porn on their computers, her excuse was, oh, well, there's so much internet stuff nowadays, we just have to lessen the sentence for this. So she is actually working pro pedophilia, and she was put into
Yeah,
the
basically saying,
Supreme
hey, the
Court.
more content you produce, the less we'll care.
Exactly. It's like a statistic, whatever. And really, each one of those is a situation of abuse for that child. Like, there's that many more children being abused. Shouldn't it be shocking? Like, more shocking? But no,
It
they're
should
like,
be.
it's desensitized. Because whatever. So, you're right.
Yeah. And
This, go ahead. I'll be
no,
quiet.
I was just gonna agree with you, essentially, that yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, to be honest, like, what you said right now is, like, why I'm here today, why I started disclosing on Emma's podcast and everything, because I was like, you like, we know how many victims there are, how much content there is, and,
Right.
like, that's why it's like I had to come out and be like, we exist, like the kids you see, like, that everyone
Yeah.
just acts as, like, is something that is just a statistic, you know what I mean? Like, I really feel like, because I've been lucky enough to heal and get to this point of, like, groundedness through all of, like, the shit that I went through, and really to a place of using all the things internally, my strengths that had been used against me for me, that it feels like my obligation, to really, like, I mean, wake people the fuck up. I mean,
Yeah.
really, I'm sorry it's inconvenient for you to think for 2 seconds about a child being raped. But
Yeah.
it's fucking heart-wrenching and life-changing for a fucking reason. And
I
people like
agree.
me, like, went through that shit and saw so many people go through it,
Right.
and it's like, and we can't have, like, this attitude of even looking at it like it's always just going to be a statistic until it becomes their child, and that's where we're going to
Yes.
get to, because it's getting worse.
Right. And especially with what the tube sites that people post their own porn content, and there's no vetting of how old the people are, who's actually posting it, and they children, like,
YouTube and
with
Instagram, I've seen disgusting things on.
what's that? Uh,
I said
uh,
YouTube and Instagram, I've seen
right.
disgusting things on.
Yes, exactly. YouTube and Instagram are they're promoting it. They're like, there's videos of young gymnast girls, and it says in the times, like they'll put timestamps in the comments for when she does the splits or whatever, and everybody can like, ooh. And then mothers on Instagram sell their children. Like they put the codes in there, and the mothers are the pimps, and it's, you know, these sites that are
Like
like
I'm
a
saying, this is
young
why
girl.
I'm here.
Right. And
Most people
there's
can't,
a
like, so most people see that and just scroll, you know, and just
right,
are like, oh, it's just a girl gymnast, because they don't have in the back of their head what I've been through, what you know what I mean.
right,
So a lot of people just like assume it's innocent content, you know, like
right,
a lot of even like my own photography or stuff would initially look like innocent, you know, kind of stuff, you know, until you know what the fuck you're looking for, you know, and
right.
you're basically doing like an OnlyFans
Yes.
promo on
Right,
Instagram is like of these what a lot of these mothers are doing. And the fact
right,
that people can't even like conceptualize that's what's happening, because they can't, they you know, my prong when it comes to talking about things from a mental health perspective is about dissociation to heal victims, but also because we need to like focus on understanding fucking psychopaths, because these are the people that, you know, like everyone knows they exist, but everyone thinks they don't fucking know them. You know what I mean? And
right,
it's like statistically, no, you know, they assume that they would. Oh, like, you know, no one knew fucking like Ted Bundy was what he was. No one
right,
knew Gacy was what he was. And in
right.
those few instances, people can be like, oh, we should have known, you know. But that's why I'm here. Like I'm saying, it's like we need to fucking
Yes.
wise people up to what the reality of the world is. And yeah, it's a minority, you know, when we're talking about like the number of people that suffer from these antisocial personality fucking demonic ass, you know, brain fucking dysfunctions, you know, that are able to do these very inhumane things to another human being. But regardless, like we need to like people need to like be somewhat aware so that they can be on guard of this stuff, because the thing is, these are the
Right.
predators that are coming after their kids because of the internet, like you said. You know, it's
Yes.
like there's no
Yeah.
boundaries anymore to
Yeah.
getting into someone's home.
There's, yes, exactly. They can groom the children through the TikTok, through the Instagram. They can be, you know, oh, and that, what's his name? The To Catch a Predator. That guy, like it's like every day he just gets more and more of these people, but, you know, catfishing them into meeting with this young boy or girl, and like, oh, there's the cops, and like, get them, you know. It's just so many, like, these people, they try to groom what they think are children, you know, and that's just normal pedophiles. That's not even the SRA
Yeah.
people in that cult. I mean, the people in the SRA cults are, they have a whole system of abducting, buying kids, you know, blackmailing fathers into, you know, participating. And I'm sure, like, Kathy O'Brien's
I
father
think the
was excited to
blackmail
work for the
isn't,
government.
yeah.
What's that?
I don't think it's blackmailing the fathers necessarily into, well, I guess blackmailing the fathers into participating by giving over their own kid, because
That's what
that's
I
the
mean.
thing, like most people need to understand, like if we're dealing with a psychopath who is willing to put their own dick in their infant or toddler or child, you know what I mean, like really they don't have any qualms letting someone else do it, you know. It's
Right.
like the only reason they may act like concerned is more because they're not getting anything out of it. You know,
Wow.
so if it's
Yeah.
an instance that they're getting something out, you know, if someone goes behind their back and abuses their kid, you know what I mean, then they're fucking mad because they're possessive of shit like that, you know. But
Wow.
really, you know, that's the whole point, like we were thinking of the blackmail thing, is that, you know, well, my kid is my ticket to freedom,
Right.
so cool. I'm cool with letting multiple people abuse them. And in my instance, you know, because I was used for things that were, you know, like MK Ultra style program related, you know, and the whole like NWO kind of stuff, you know, because there was more kind of time and training invested into me and everything like that. That was another thing that was a huge huge hold, for him, because he saw himself as like rubbing shoulders with important people. And that was for my dad always, for like a lot of, sociopaths, like is a very motivating factor. Is like the power is like what they gravitate towards. It's like the only thing that gets them off, really, so like that, it's like thing. It's like there's multiple, like when you're dealing with psychopaths, it's always an equation, and there's like multiple different like things of like, oh, like I can get this from it, I can get this from it,
Right.
and like and it's however it benefits the best.
Right. And a psychopath usually they like we talked about on our other shows how Satanism is like the eventual end of psychopathy. Like if you let psychopathy fester, it grows into full-fledged Satanism, which is like a justification of their psychopathy. And I mean,
and just kind of making them feel better about dying one day, basically, because they don't want to believe in the belief system that says they're going to get spanked by, like karma or fucking a benevolent God. They want to believe that all of the things that make them happy are achieving them a higher position in the underworld, essentially, for the dark side. That's where they hedge their bets. Like anyone hedges their bets with whatever religion they go with. They're just like, well, I know there's a lot of beliefs out there, but this is the one that like feels right to me. Like for a psychopath, that's the one that feels right to them, is the one that like totally like is cool.
It resonates with their broken heads. Like it resonates and they gravitate towards it. Right.
And if you believe in the involvement, like at a certain point, because they love power and the entities are more than willing to give over a little power for a little bit of time, like fucking around in this realm, like it's going to be very easy to see, how that slippery slope becomes very fucked up, like, and very like, there's a point of no return that the person chooses to kind of get to, by their actions, to where now, like how I feel Satanism, any dark occultism, it doesn't necessarily have to be Satan, because a lot of my abuse was druidic, like because that my particular abuser, that was his faith, my dad was Catholic, so it was kind of his.
I kind of lump all that in with Satanism myself, but like it's people use the term differently, I guess. So
well, anything that's like dark forces, I think is fine,
right. Like what if they worship involution and decay rather than growth and creation, then like it's if they align their train, if they get on the track of involution and decay. And so basically like a psychopath craves power, right? But really power is domination of another, to dominate another and have their will be
in your environment.
Right. Like
I think that's a lot of the rituals stuff too, is like, and it's very controlled, like the environment, because it's not always, and that's where it comes back to the porn, like it's common for survivors to be talking about Nazi scenes, or like in my experience, like military scenes or stuff like that, where there is an idea that, there's some, like you saying, domination, controlled environment, different stuff like that, for sure, but that's what I try and tell people is it's natural for like, what's evidence of control, like this is how you get snuff pornography, is like, how do you have like evidence in reality that you're in control of someone else, is you put them in a situation, like a child or anyone, but you put them in a situation that they really don't want to be in, and they're powerless to, you have the power, they have no power, they're in pain, they're hungry, cold, whatever it is, what
totally
I mean,
helpless.
Like being, sexually, whatever it is, exactly, like totally helpless. That is the thing that gets them off the most, because it's the sex plus, being able to see in physical reality, how much power they how much power they have over, how much domination they're doing over this. And I constantly come back to that, because they themselves got to a point when they were infants or toddlers or whatever. I don't really believe that psychopaths are born. Like, I do think they're all created, you know, and but at a certain point, you know, their world as an infant, as a toddler, whatever, was so overwhelming, and they weren't able to dissociate, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's what you get. Because now that little being is eternally has zero empathy, because they're not getting anything love, so they're just going to shut off their need for that because they need to survive, you know what I mean? And now all they're obsessed with is controlling their fucking environment, because all they've known is fucking not, you know, powerlessness essentially, and pain and everything like that. So on one hand, you know, I don't give any passes to any of these motherfuckers, and I think they all need to like burn in hell, or if they're willing to like turn themselves in and like out everyone else they're into, like, you know, give us a call. You know, like, I'm on board with anyone that's going to fucking be like, I did it, I'm turning myself in, and I'll rat out everyone that fucking was part of it. Cool, you're on our side.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like, bring the truth, more truth. That's what we need. Like, that's, yes, everybody needs to speak it, everybody that was there, because then that's the only way we need to shine a light on it, and the only people that can do that are the ones that were there. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I was forced to perpetrate, like a lot of survivors of, you know, trafficking, as part of my, you know, as part of my involvement in the pornography, you know, like a lot of the training that I had to go through, you know, was like a lot of sadistic training, you know, like essentially being tortured and everything, is so that, you know, they can then later create a very angry part that's able to torture others, basically, you know,
because you're craving the dominant, because that part, like,
they create a part in you that's craving that domination, that release of all this anger that you have for being so mistreated, you know, and they're like, okay, like, here's where you direct it. And because that part doesn't have any understanding that they're a normal kid, you know, on you know, a normal regular basis, you know, and that this is just like a fucking crazy isolated incident, you know, that part doesn't have that awareness. So that part, you know, they've created to be 100% Stockholmed into being like, you know, you give me a hoop to jump through, I fucking do it. You know, you tell me, you know, jump, I how high, you know, and at that point, you know, and at that point your wires are crossed too. Like, there's to where you do almost see pain as pleasure in a bunch of fucked up weird ways, you know, like.
Right, because that's the first way that you experience pleasure. It's not like you're experiencing normal sex as a teenager or adult or whatever, discovering it for the first time. Like, it's mixed in with the trauma and the pain. It's so, like, that's another thing with the porn, is that it works on the same wiring, so that when you consume a bunch of it, you become addicted to it. And like, I was looking up there, it releases dopamine, norepinephrine, which is like the brain's adrenaline. The dopamine creates a focus and the craving. Oxytocin and vasopressin creates long-term memory of the person. Their memory binds to the object that gave them pleasure, whether it's a person or an object or the porn itself. It's like you're getting oxytocin, and that's like the same as like mother and child bonding drug. And, you know, it's the same release. And then endorphins, they get a pleasure high, and then serotonin after release, calm and relaxation. So that all of those drugs, plus the ego of like, I'm dominating this little creature, this little person, that I'm making them have sex with this animal or whatever, and, you know, and I'm filming it and I'm saving it forever, documenting it, you know, like, and I can use it against people.
Like a trophy. They love trophies.
What was that? Sorry.
They love trophies. They could always get away with this shit. They never filmed it. You know what I mean? Like, but they like, they're obsessed with it, you know?
Right. And having that is like a tool for the future, and with the blackmail. And so having like in your situation where your handler invited lots of young military men to be blackmailed and participate. He has this film now that he can make money from it, which is a third thing that we didn't even talk about: the blackmail and the abuse. Like it,
that was, we got off on tangents, but that was
right.
other than, yeah, it's like the people doing it. You have, the blackmail for the kids, if they're ones they're keeping around that aren't throwaways, because if we get to the snuff pornography, that's like 100% like a lot of kids you'll be dealing with is ones that have been kidnapped or just different things, like where there was no like
Training
early
or
abuse
efforts.
exactly. They don't care how the kid reacts on camera.
Right.
The kid's not,
they just want him
the
to
only
be afraid
part
and
they're
to
slaying
have
is victim,
victim blood and cadaver, basically, is what they.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, and so the third thing, is like, that's where like people need to like realize like that, as much as they focus on like, drugs or weapons or something like that, trafficking for organized crime, really, like when you think about it for 2 seconds, like human trafficking, especially child trafficking, is the most lucrative one of them all, because you can sell a kid many times throughout their life, and a lot of times even into adulthood, because they'll end up still working for pimps, or in the sex trade industry, somehow,
Well, a lot of
essentially,
times,
or the
like
drug
they're
industry, you know.
like their whole childhood, they recognize that that's the only way they make money, and then when they get older,
Yes.
they do it for themselves, and then there's that
Well,
whole like
it's
sex work is
it's like
work, and
being
then they.
born in a jungle and then being thrown into New York and being
Right.
expected to know how to survive. Their whole world, and that's part of like why I talk too, is just because this world, I know, is hard for people to understand because they've never even glimpsed it before. They don't. It's hard to know that it exists. That there's this whole, everything you've seen talking about the porn industry. You just have to miniaturize it, or maybe like make it bigger so it seems like it's like maybe more lucrative. But it's the same thing, like you have directors, you have fucking handlers, you have people setting up the fucking sets, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not all of it is just like user generated, like on my
Right.
fucking iPhone, like using my kid or something like that, like. And I would argue most of my experience was more with those kinds of things, because I was, that was the whole purpose of my training, was to create what's essentially, and what, I refer to as Susie, my beta trainer's daughter, who had done a lot of training with me, was a couple years older. That essentially, if we can do a screen share, I could send you a photo,
Um.
actually, of like what we were, what should
Yeah.
I
Let's
call it?
see. You
Not right
can.
now, but I can like
Okay.
email it to you
Yeah, I'll
like
put it.
later
I
on.
can edit it
Regardless,
in later. I can edit it in. I can like
yeah,
put it in.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Perfect. Just so that people have like an image, like one thing you'll notice about like the body language is like me, I'm like have like this scared look on my face, and like a little white dress, and like I've got like my hands like clenched over my genitals, and her, a couple years older, she's got this like crazy like model like poise, like with like one foot in front of the other, like she's like, man, she's like, it's like her altar is like turned on, but it's just being able to see from the body language, it's
Mm.
stuff that's very validating,
Yeah, to
for
show the level of like where you are in the programming and where she is in the program. She's 2 more years advanced or
model
whatever, older
already,
than you.
basically,
Right.
and she's like 7 years old,
Right.
like, and it's
Just
like,
like the Eyes
it's
Wide
because,
Shut, like just like those women, they're trained in Millich's rainbow fashions, and then they get older and they're like having model shoots at Rockefeller Plaza, and then they're
yeah.
at the party there doing the rituals, like they.
I would argue that most models are most likely, like, at the higher echelons, are probably just like the high end versions of,
Right.
of the girls that end up in the strip clubs and stuff, which I don't
Yes.
judge, because I myself ended up in a strip club for a little bit, in college, like,
Right.
because it is very easy to like commodify things that for other
Right.
people are like, why would you do that? It's like, well, for me, it's like it didn't feel like it had the same value, as other people. It seemed like it was just a way to make money.
Right.
I stopped because like it. I realized that it was going to be a very easy way to like feed into my addictions and stuff. So it was a way that I think higher power was looking for me to be like, you know what? They told me I was riding my bicycle to work, and they told me that that wasn't very safe. So I was like, well, fuck you, then I quit.
Jesus. Well, good. I mean, it's because like it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm
No,
sure
that's
it
a
would have
good
been
thing.
much
I don't
harder
think that was
for you
very
to get
smart
to this point. It would have been much harder for you to be here now in your recovery and your mental stability if you were in that environment all the time, being still seen as an object for
Well,
sex. I
even then,
mean,
it was being aware that like even then I wasn't aware 100% like what DID was, you know, and like, you know, like multiplicity and everything. I always had the experience of having multiple voices in my head, but I was just like, whatever, you know, it's just normal, I guess. You know?
it's the only thing
So,
you've
but in
ever
any
known, right?
it was, yeah, exactly. So there was, you know, there was always a voice when I was arguing when I went to work that I could just, you know, and that's a lot of what was entrained with like the part that would do the offending or be more of like a prostitute or madame or something, is they would often, you know, give us a little bit of drugs or alcohol or different things to like, you know, loosen up. Or it's weird. It's like I think that it hypnotically was trained sometimes that even like soda, just like the bubbles and stuff like that, would be kind of like, you know, kind of create that same state in us. You know, essentially. Wow. It was so. But in any case, you know, there was a part, you know, that just was like, you know, we could be making a ton of money here if we just drink a little bit before, because it was always something like that would facilitate, you know, like switching, you know, at that time, especially like really, really easily, you know, to parts that were very self-destructive and everything like that. But in any case, you know, and then but it was having that realization that I was like, oh, it's like if I'm having to like fight myself not to like drink to make like more money at work, you know, and knowing that like, you know, that you can switch on that flirtatious personality that's going to get you all the dollars, you know what I mean? But it's still having, you know, because I did have that other part of me, which to a degree was entrained by, you know, my main handler, because he wasn't too interested. Like that was always something that peeved him, was like my promiscuity during college, you know, because he didn't like the idea. I was trained for him. Like I wasn't supposed
he owned
to.
you.
And for the people that he wanted to sell me to, you know, a lot of what we're talking about with the child porn stuff, you know, was pre like 7 and younger, you know, before I was like, you know, really like given to him, you know, solely.
It was part of your breaking process, the breakdown in the beginning.
That's what it was. And then after that, I was supposed to be reserved, you know, my normal self was supposed to be almost afraid of sex, you know, even though I was like obsessed with it, and it came up in my art like constantly, which was weird to no one, I guess. You know? It was from a young age, but you know, it was something that was supposed to be repressed, you know, like something that wasn't supposed to be like coming out, you know, in service of anyone except for whoever might.
Right. But art itself is a connection to your subconscious. So like, of course it's going to bubble out.
Oh yeah.
You know, like,
So, I thought of doing a podcast like just on my art. It's so crazy looking at the old stuff and just like seeing the way everything came out before
I would love to
it came out consciously. It's crazy.
If you would like to go to do that on my show, I'd be very interested. Like one of the best, I went to art school. Like
I would love to, you know.
I love the critique, like looking at other people's work and trying to figure out like what they're thinking and what they're trying to express. That would be really fun. I'm going to make a note. That would be fun. Okay, so he owned you. And
we totally should, because it's something I'm thinking about, but it's way more fun to do it with you, you know, with someone who's interested in it, you know, than just myself, you know.
I am interested, and I love art at all, and like just to see, like I view art as a mirror for it's a mirror to the subconscious of the creator. Like, so we can learn so much about ourselves just by making the art, and then we see it later and whoa, but it came from you, you know, and you can learn so much from I I would be delighted for that. So we should schedule that. I'm going to make a note for sure. So, but okay, getting back to where you were, your handler, Schmiel or Schlemazel, he
Smeagol.
owned you, right? Schmiegel,
I just call it Smeagol, you know,
right on. But he wanted you. He wanted the front personality to be afraid of sexual encounters, so that it would reserve that portion of you for him.
Yeah.
Right. And so
exactly, you know, like
so he continued to, like, I guess he did access you later, like when you were 20 or whatever, for rituals, but it tapered off. Like, he only really wanted you when you're in your younger years. It seems like crazy to me, but these people, they like the children because of the easy domination. You know, it seems like pedophilia.
I kind of
And
feel like he kept me around longer because I stayed looking longer than maybe some people. Like a lot of people have always thought I'm a lot younger than I am. You know,
right.
I was never very like developed or anything like that. I think that's, and to be honest, I think that was a big reason for him keeping me and liking me in the role of, you know, where I was in the rituals too, like as, you know, essentially like a butcher like server type thing. Because when I look back on it, like archetypally, and that's something we could totally get into with the art, because it's like
Yes.
it's like the same like version of the like costume over and over again. That's like, oh, okay, well, like I see what was trying to come out. You know, but regardless, you know, it's like you're always like, you know, like supposed to be almost like it feels like you're almost supposed to be like, you know, the woman with the weapon, like the archetype of like Diana, or like, you know, like the virginal huntress kind of
Right.
thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
So like that's kind of like a lot of like what I think probably why he kept me around like a little bit longer, because he definitely was like a pedophile. I don't think I ever saw him really interested in anyone that was older, you know, or anything. He had it, you know, and it was little girls, you know, from my experience, you know. But regardless, you know, that it's like because I stayed looking younger, it's like almost like I fit the role, you know, younger, because it's kind of like we were saying, like with the, you know, with the ritual events, which are just kind of like snuff pornography plus robes, you know, if people want to see
Right.
it that way, you know, and robes and ritual, I guess. That essentially, you know, what you end up having is, you know, it's very specific, like we talked about the setting, you know, so you have very specific like people that play the different like roles and everything like that. And that's all part of the, I don't know, that's all part of the fetish, it's all part of this setting, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's all, like that's like the spice for them that like adds to like both,
Right.
if they believe in the ritual stuff, you know, it adds to like the ritual power of it that they see by ticking all those boxes, you know, of having this person, you know, who's a 13-year-old virgin or whatever, you know, as like a victim or something, or like, you know, a 5-year-old as a virgin, or an infant as a victim, you know. But then you have like the people that are, you know, performing it, just like if you were at church or mass or anything like that, you know, like you have someone standing here, someone standing there, you know. And that, you know, for me was just one of the many kind of like performance roles that like had, you know, like by far the most fucked up one, and the one
Right.
that's been the hardest to deal with, you know. But it was just kind of another quote unquote like performance role. And the more fucked up the role, the more kind of dissociative that part is. So yes, I do have trouble
Yeah.
sometimes communicating those experiences, because a lot of times like we were in like kind of a drugged state and stuff like that, we're in our own world. But regardless, it was kind of like, you know, it was still a performance essentially, you
Right.
know, that like you get given your costume, you get given your role for like, you know, at what point you stop, at what point you step up, you know, and perform, and at what
Right.
point you step away, you know, and like
Right.
everything.
Just like a Catholic mass, when you get up and you go and get the host and whatever, and like same thing. So, but that kind of goes along with the same performance that you did as a kid. You were taught to act like you like it. basically, right? And was that
Yeah.
part of it?
So, well, it depends on what part we're talking about. So, like sexually, like there was a separate part that would have like what would be considered like a dominatrix like kind of role, that like there's usually multiple parts depending on what the director is going to order, So there's going to be a part that's meant to perform sexually, but is meant to portray what's like a very bubbly, innocent little girl. You're also going to have like, my main handler, because he always liked kind of putting me in more adult clothing or roles or stuff like that, and it kind of got off on me being more dangerous or stuff like that. And especially for blackmail, if they wanted a dominatrix that's like 6, like that another part, had that role essentially, to
Wow.
essentially be, to had, gone through a lot of torture, had gotten to that Stockholm point where they had their wires crossed about the pain and pleasure. And now both for them performing, when they perform the torture on other kids, the same tortures that they went through, they now see it as something that's not harmful, but that maybe they're getting pleasure from or something, So
Right.
that's kind of like how they've kind of crossed it there. And then if we're
Mhm.
talking about the part that was meant to play the butcher role in whatchamacallit, in rituals,
Right.
that part has no thought about whether they like or don't like the situation they're in. That part is always the closest way that I can describe it to people is they feel like an extension of whatever weapon they're holding, like whatever knife, like how a knife feels about cutting a stick, a
Right.
rock, a piece of paper,
Right.
you know, a small child's fingers up into small pieces, who's like
Right.
deceased, like the knife has no thought about it. The
Right.
knife is essentially, and in dissociative programming, having parts that see themselves as inanimate objects is actually very common,
Mm.
and that for that part, is essentially, and the slave part is essentially, what we've talked about before, closest to that get out sunken place, essentially,
Right.
where all of your consciousness feels almost like it's like a sluggish black mud or so. I don't know how to describe it. That you're
Right.
it almost like you're not controlling your body. Like what you're essentially almost like in a holding pattern, in a stagnant state, waiting for direction from
Right.
your essentially your handler, your master, so they tell you, put on this clothing, drink this thing that might make you even a little bit more fucked up or something like that, and go like stand over there, and
Right.
wait, until your cue. And then you're going to do, they'll just list
Right.
everything, and you'll just internalize it. And then you'll go stand there. And when you're standing there and the whole ritual is going on, whether this is something performed for the benefit of psychopaths that have that religion, or whether this is being performed for the benefit of cameras, the whole time, like that part, of me, essentially feels no different than a knife sitting on a shelf.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you're there, but you're not really there, like you're kind of 100% inside your head, and there are things going on around. And on a certain level, that's like a protective thing too, because
Yes.
I cannot describe to you how much like visual things are triggering to me, yes, but the things that are way more triggering to me are sounds. Like that's that's the shit I
Hmm.
cannot handle, because that's most, that's to be honest, like one of the worst parts when you're dealing with this kind of stuff is like is dealing with people, children that are screaming or crying or begging for their life or their mom, you know what I mean? Like how do you deal with that, once, let alone over and over and over? So,
Right.
when people are like, maybe be like, how could you block out so much? It's like, dude, like on a certain level, how could
That's
you
how
not?
exactly.
Like
That's
how,
how it
like,
has to be done.
that's they, and the thing is they create, when I had mentioned Emma's podcast, the core kind of splitting event, at the end of that, multi-day process of being like tortured, in a cage in a fucking bunker, with being left with a fucking child's corpse and all kinds of shit, you know what I mean? That at the end of that, like when they like really, like when they showed us like them burning a child to death in front of us, the expected reaction at the end point, you know, before we went back into normal reality, was that the 3 kids that were still there would have, you know, initially might have some reaction, but by the end of it, they wanted us, you know, just nothing. You know what I mean? Like we weren't
Not
even
crying.
no crying, no, like we weren't witnessing fucking anything. You know what I mean? Like, and that's because that's this initial state they create in a fucking 4-year-old, you know, through a lot of torture, and then is like accessed, you know, and multiplied multiple times, you know, into these different parts that are now able to be in this place where they can completely split off hearing the sounds of someone, you know, screaming for their life before they're killed, you know. And that is like that's the reason I got to be here, is because it's like, you know, even for me, like in healing, wrapping my head around the shit I was experiencing was like just totally mind-blowing, you know, because it's so outside of our normal realm of experience, you know. And that's the thing that's like hard for people to understand, is like, yeah, you can, you know, like people are like, how can they have these events and stuff with all these people involved and no one knows, you know, how are they not getting caught? And it's like, it's all a contained system, you know. They have their own filmers, they have their own victims, their own supply, you know. Yeah, they kidnap kids, but a lot of times they farm, you know, they farm them as part of like, you know, incest and cult families and stuff like that, you know. So because they know they have rituals coming up, so they'll be doing, you know, when you're dealing with families that actually believe in this shit, you know, where people, they'll be doing rapes and rape rituals to impregnate the person to use that baby to sacrifice later on. And that's what we're saying. It's another situation where it's a twofer for them. Like, we get a victim for this ceremony, and then we also, you know, get to, you know, affect, you know, and essentially traumatize a fetus, like, you know, to either use that, let that fetus live, you know, and they use it as a future programmable, you know, like infant, or they just use it as fuel for their, you know, sacrifice schedule.
Yeah. And they get promoted in the cult. They get, oh, you want to sacrifice your kid? Great, we'll give you a promotion, and, you know, like higher on the pyramid of domination of others. Man, so in order to create that knife on the shelf as an adult, it takes years and years of abuse, and which happened to be in front of cameras, and all of this content. I mean, it was made in the 80s, or you know, like in your case or whatever. So that was before the internet.
Yeah. Well, I was born in '88, so most of it would have, yeah, most 90s. Of it would have been the '90s, you know, and early thousands, even, because I was still being used for that kind of stuff, like up until I was 20. So what is that, like?
Right.
But regardless, you know, like, so I mean, it was through middle school and high school at like to a lesser extent, you know, but still, like, that was the whole purpose of like that knife on the shelf training. Like, there's a lot of, you know, anatomy training, there's a lot of butchery stuff, there's a lot of training that has, like, it's a specialized, you know, like, you know, like hiring a chef for an event or something. Like, you don't just hire some dude off the street, you hire someone who knows what the fuck they're doing, you know. And for me, because it was either on film or in front of people that are very wealthy and they want shit to go off the way it's supposed to go off, you know what I mean? Like, you're like that's what, you know, you need, what is essentially like luxury or elite slaves, you know, to do this kind of stuff, and not just be over there fumbling and fucking up their fucking, you know, their fucking cannibalism host, you know what I mean? Like, they want things
or one that would like let the little kid go, and like, you know, they definitely don't want somebody with a heart that's going to be like, mess everything up. Who's like, hey, no, don't do that. Like, you know.
Well, exactly, because like, it's like, so for me, like this part never faced anything with the struggle. So the person was either like, their child or animal was either deceased already or was incapacitated / to the point, you know, where they were, you know, because a lot of times they had already been brutalized. Like, that's where, you know, the it's like, I was there to finish the job, essentially, you know.
And they had to get the blood with all the chemicals in the blood, like the adrenalizing it, and so they had to torture it before they did the right. Sorry.
Exactly, exactly. So this is, and that's, just another industry, that you could talk about as like another offshoot of like, or how you get the a drug industry off of,
Right.
the
The
snuff
blood.
pornography, is when you're dealing
Right.
with adrenalized blood. Exactly. I really think that most of them prefer not to have it synthesized and to have it like straight from the source. That's why I think these rituals are like big and special and important to them and
Right.
everything, but yeah, but for that part too, it's like the thing that we were like that we're handling. See, even that word, the thing that we were handling when I'm talking about like a fucking child, if you, or like, even
Wow.
like in one instance a teenager, that's what I'm saying. Like, but that's like the state they create in is not just that I am a thing, but that
Right.
this is a thing, that there's like zero, like, there's
Yeah.
been a lot of training in morgues or different shit too, to where what you were handling was something that was dead. So being able to train, that it's like, this is just what I was doing then, kind of
Right.
thing for that part. Like, and that's
And
a lot of it. It's creating those
when you
walls
were
of like deception.
a kid too, didn't they want you to perform like you were like limp and not giving any resistance like that already? You're training your mind to be a thing, and to
Yeah.
not move. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Not a question, I guess.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what my next study too. No,
What's
no,
that?
it's fine. That's what my next. Oh no, I was going to say that's actually what my next video is on, that I've been working on filming. It's just kind of talking about how the different adrenaline responses get, turned into different dissociative states, that get taken advantage of by the abusers. So you have like, like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, essentially. And like, so freeze would be like essentially the state, the normal reaction, kind of like the deer in the headlights that everyone knows,
Right.
or like if
Classical
an earthquake
dissociation.
happens, some people just like stop, they don't
Right.
go anywhere, they just like freeze.
Yeah.
So that's a normal response. That's definitely one, that's like taken advantage of, when it comes to, creating that kind of part, that's essentially able to be like in a dissociative state, but with no will of their own. Almost, they're completely open, blank slate.
Wow. Like a doll, basically. That.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was saying. That's what my main handler liked. For me personally, most of the time was to just be 100% like a doll, essentially, as and sometimes too with like with other scene like pornography and stuff like that, that was the case too, that was the case with like the gang rape I had talked about. It's like for that one, it's like they just wanted someone, that was completely immobile and everything, and they do train that in. Sometimes they facilitate it with like drugging as well, but for the most part they can hypnotically, and through the training create that. And for my abuser, like I said, I thought it was so stupid to create this like what was supposed to be a very dangerous like individual to other people or other kids or animals, I guess. But
Mhm.
for him, like he never wanted a fight, and he wanted to be able
Right.
to essentially, trigger that switch in me to be, initially starting off with like maybe someone who's a little bit more, the part that has some sexual knowledge and stuff. But eventually it's like he wants to have the control too, to be able to switch on, just like zonk out doll mode, and now like,
Yeah.
it's like your corpse or something.
Wow. That makes sense. It goes along with the idea of like his ego aggrandizement of like, I can dominate this dangerous thing. So, it's scary to others, but to me, she's like a slave doll. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure it feeds his ego.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, you
Yeah.
mentioned your video, and we didn't get that on this show yet. Where can they find that
Oh,
video?
yeah. I only have 3 videos up right now because I got a little baby and a full-time job, so I'm like
It's understandable.
and a
We
bunch
all
of
work. It's and like
yeah,
being
yeah,
mom is most
exactly.
important.
So I'm doing my best, to get more content out because people have told me it's helpful. So
It
that's the
is.
only reason I'm doing it is just to share what helped me, for both survivors and people, like you that are just trying to understand like dissociation and psychopathy and
Right.
understanding, just everything we talked about.
The
All the
mind
stuff is
and
stuff
yes, the cults, right? Yeah.
I really, in the beginning, I'm going to be just focusing on just trying to help people understand dissociation, though, just because I feel like for survivors and um, allies both, it goes a
Right.
long way to like answering a lot of questions and making everything else make a lot more sense, basically.
Yes. Like I mean,
And it's
really,
very,
how can this happen? How does it work? And you in your first video or the second, you separated DID from DDNOS, which like
Mhm.
is very big information that people
Yeah.
don't really know, and they can find that. That's in your first video, maybe I guess the second video. So
I
like,
think
there's
I think yeah, it's kind of like a multi-part thing right now that I've been doing as far as like just trying to do like a basic overview series of. So I think I talk
Mhm.
about in both of them. The first
Great,
video is just a trigger warning and essentially disclaimer, just
right?
letting people know what you're dealing with. But if I'm going to be talking about, and disclaimer, because I'm not an expert on anything. I'm just a survivor sharing my experience. So
Right. Well, I very much am thankful to talk to you and hear from you. And
I forgot to say your name.
you're doing a very, yeah, we didn't get the name yet. So
Oh
where
yeah,
where can they
so
find it?
it's
On
Desert.
YouTube, it is on YouTube. The name is what?
It's Desert Dakini. It's DESERT, DAKINI, a survivor's perspective.
Awesome. And you are starting a Rumble as well, and you're looking at Odyssey as well. I hope you work with them too. Um,
Yeah.
and Odyssey actually allows anybody to download. So like that is a feature. Like if you want people to have information that they can
I worked that
take
with the
it.
Kay Griggs one, which was awesome.
Great. Yeah. Kay Griggs is so informative, and I'm so glad that you got
It
to
was so
listen to her.
validating. I was like, oh my gosh, she could be talking about like my dad and his friends. It's disgusting.
Exactly. And she's taught, and like her husband, yeah, everybody that's listening needs to hear the Kay Griggs interview as well, because that's very informative for military, SRA, occult, psychopathy, all that. Um, she's the wife of one of the abusers that was part of the cult. Yeah, and I'm glad that you were able to hear that, and I could bring that to your attention, because that's a huge video. It's very it's integral for understanding this type of stuff, and I'm glad it
Oh yeah.
validates, because truth should be seen by everybody, and it helps validate everyone in their experience. Um, so Desert Dakini on
Yeah.
YouTube. And I think we should get you on some podcast players as well. It's really easy. I'll talk to you after we're done. And the one that I use is free. And you can drop the video that you made for YouTube. You can drag it and drop it, and it'll go to Spotify, Apple, iTunes, all of them. And so that you can get the word out further, just in audio form.
Yeah.
I get a lot more people
Yeah.
listening on audio,
I mean, most of the time I'm just listening to stuff and glancing up occasionally anyway. So that's,
right?
that's fine with me.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I get a lot more
As long as it'll
traction.
reach, help reach more people it can help, like
That's
that's
right.
totally fine.
That's right. That's beautiful. So okay, so I guess like we kind of mentioned the tube sites, but just knowing the information that you have given us, and if we understand that Pornhub is like a YouTube for porn, and they got XTube, and they got all these other ones online where anybody can upload anything, and there's almost nobody checking it. And these survivors are finding their abuse online and they're re-traumatized, and it affects their lives in many ways. I just wanted people to recognize that the people that are selling the content that was created in your situation with the organized crime of that, I'm sure they also use these type of tube sites to advertise and to get their material out there to get more viewers and pedophiles to come to their, like that's what YouTube does.
Sure.
And like Instagram, it helps with the advertising of the illegal content. So do you think that if people knew about this, they would not use Pornhub? Do you think maybe we could make that work?
Um, so I think like there's like maybe a multi-pronged like way to approach this is like,
Right.
yeah, I think we should let more people know, because kind of like you were talking about before with like, like I'm a totally sex positive person,
Right.
but realistically, the way porn has been created nowadays is, facilitating addiction, facilitating people that were like maybe on that psychopathic slide, at a young age, to essentially through the internet be pushing themselves further down it, like that's something that I do think
Yes.
is the case, that a lot of people that might have had psychopathic or antisocial tendencies pre-porn, like explosion and everything like that didn't have access to like everything, that essentially, it is the kind of thing where you start, deadening, your empathy essentially, and
Desensitizing.
just like desensitizing. And if you
Right.
already have those tendencies, it does lead to, I've communicated with a therapist before who does a lot of work with perpetrators and psychopaths, and pretty much all of them talk about, porn being part of like their, the
Compulsions.
initial step into addiction. And I'm not saying that
Right.
everyone's going to,
Addiction.
watch porn into a pedo, you know what I mean? But if someone has those tendencies, the way things have been created nowadays has just become
Right.
like, it's increasing the number of people that we're having to deal with that have those tendencies than it would have before, just purely through access,
Right.
And one thing I would like, is yeah, I think I've experienced that even in my own life, just like different guy friends, especially, like stuff, as people become more aware of like what they're dealing with when it comes to the sex trade, whether that's porn or whether that's, even like strip clubs and shit. It's like, yeah, on a certain level, it's fun. I used to have a shit ton of fun in strip clubs and going and shooting the shit and stuff like that. But then at a certain point, it just becomes sad,
Right.
once like what probably all of these girls went through, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, and that it's like, it becomes less sexy, and I hope it would be the same for porn, is that if there was more knowledge that it wasn't all consensual and everything, and what things were like feeding into, and like you said, like survivors seeing their own stuff on there, like just so much, or even I'm sure there's tons of like, questionable like teenage porn and stuff on there where people are just
That's
given the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean?
everywhere.
Like, and
Yeah.
it's all bullshit. That's what I'm saying. It's all bullshit. It's like, they're going to say it's someone like me who is like, oh, she looks like she's 15, but she's actually, 18 or 19 or
Right.
something like that,
But
like,
there's no
and
way
it's
to
just like,
prove
no,
it.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's no oversight. There's that, hopefully, kind of like you're saying, from one end, we'll get to the place where like people just are consuming this less, essentially, once they
Right.
have once the majority of people have a better understanding of like what it is they're consuming, and maybe we could go back to, like, it sounds lame, but go back to something that's like where there's, more, I don't even know if that was ever a thing, trusted production companies or something like that. But I know in the past recently there's been more people coming out trying to be, produce sex positive shit,
Right.
but regardless, the whole Pornhub thing, on another hand, we might need to see as like a net positive down the road too, is because these psychopaths are so fucking cocky that they constantly do shit that fucking nails them to the wall, you know what I mean? And once we
Right.
hit that tipping point, this can be another thing that we can see that way, you know, is that maybe there is, you know, maybe there is a way to see this as like, okay, like if you're a survivor and you, like, I'll be honest, if I saw a video of myself, I would be immediately saving that shit and fucking sending it to, you know, and fucking sending it to law enforcement, or saving, you know, it for when like I'm ready to open my case back up again. You know what I mean? Like, so
because
on a
it's
certain
ammunition
level,
in court, like
you're not fucking, because they're going to say you're crazy and you're lying, and you know that's what the constant thing is the defense is to defame, you know, and make you, the person who's accusing them, seem like a batshit crazy person, you know, and that they have some ulterior motives, you know, to be making this shit up, you know. But it's like, you know, once you have stuff like that, you know, and you can be like, you know, yeah, you know, even for people that looks like they wanted to be there, once we get, you know, that's the path we're on, you know, is once people understand dissociation, they're already understanding sex trafficking, or even R. Kelly shit. They're understanding grooming now. It's like, that didn't used to be a thing. Grooming did not used to be like a fucking common term. And now everyone fucking knows what grooming is, you know? So we're getting there to where people are starting to be able to recognize these behaviors that have gone under the radar for so long. And hopefully the Pornhub thing, like, yeah, it's fucking horrible. And my heart goes out to anyone who has stuff on there non-consensually and everything. But on another level, like, we have to start looking at everything in our world as fucking evidence of the shit that we're talking about, you know, and, you know, try and use it in our benefit.
Right. That's true. And thank you for that. I didn't even think of that. Like, it is, like, it's the truth. And if we save the truth and we can show it to others and be like, look at what they've done to me, you know.
Well, just like an infinite number of porn on Pornhub doesn't really do anyone anything, you know. But if like I'm saying, if there's people that are either good people that are on Pornhub and they see something questionable and they're willing to fucking flag that shit, just like, you know what I mean? At a certain point, there is going to be, if people are still going to use it, then fucking have a pair of balls, you know? Well, you know what I mean? Obviously that's why you're there, you know? And just, and start, you know, start reporting shit, start doing it to a point where it's obvious, you know, like, companies do bend to the will of consumers, you know?
Yeah, some companies are better than others. Like, I was listening to a interview on Opperman
Well, it's about
Report.
the bottom line.
Well, yeah, like the Layla Mickelwaite is doing great work fighting Pornhub and this situation, and she's trying to get
I'm gonna have to check it out. You might have to fill me in more too, because I like, you know, from the stuff I know some, but not seems like as much as.
Well, there's one guy that checks all the flagged material, and he's got a backlog of like 12 million videos, and he works a regular shift of like 8 hours a day, and, you know, 5 days a week. And then it doesn't even get on the list on there until there's 14 flags on that one video. If there's 12, it still goes up. And then when they remove a video, they leave the post and the URL and all that stuff so that they can still generate from Google when someone writes like 13-year-old gets peed on, like, it'll go right to that page and it'll say removed, but it still gets the view content and it still gets the ad revenue. It's like, so they're still making money off of. The only way to get them is to have MasterCard and Visa like make rules that they're not going to work with them. You know, like a lot of companies don't work with them. Anyway, yeah, that's a little side note.
I think that would be, like we said, about the bottom line. That's how you have to pressure any company, you know, is like, once it starts affecting how much money they're making, then they'll do something about it. Yeah, it's fucked up, you know. Hopefully in like the long term, you know, it's another thing that like gets bad to a point and then kind of hits a point where like we can actually get some awareness about everything, because that's ridiculous that you would be allowed to have that many flags. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the creator Mouthy Buddha on
he's
YouTube.
Great.
Yeah, I love his content too. But even with that, it would be interesting to look at the Pornhub deleted pages and stuff and see if there isn't some sort of like indication on where you can find the video, because there is a lot of, secret kind of, a lot of coding and stuff that they do, like with like the BH, what was it, BH or BK, different things
BH kids
like that, where you can essentially put in the URL.
There's another. I'm sorry, you're chopping up a little bit. I didn't really hear that. Sorry, you chopped up a little bit. I didn't really get all of it, but I understand about the BH kids thing.
Maybe there's breadcrumbs on the.
Right, that's true. Yeah. To find the perpetrators who did it, right. And Mouthy Buddha, it does great content. And there's another gentleman, a young man named Memory Hold, who does great work as well. And he did one video called SRC Codes. And he even shows why Tom Hanks is bad because of what the stuff that he puts on Instagram. He's like advertising for this Yandex.
Yeah.
Yandex is like Russian Google or whatever, and it's whatever. It's almost like warfare where they allow this type of content in these different countries. Yeah, Memory Hold with a D on the end. Yeah, like Memory Hold, but with a D. Like they're holding onto it and seeing and taking a look at it. He's great. I actually SRC Codes. He said that. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you were just saying that they allow things to happen in other countries. And I was like, just like Iran-Contra, which is a well-known, event that happened, that's just normal for how, the intelligence agencies fund their shit, is they do illegal things in other countries, a lot of times in our country too, but on a smaller scale, usually at the consumerist side, you know what I mean? Not the production side, and then they're like, okay, like we can fund the drugs into this country, and produce them in all these other places, but not, have an excuse not to, do anything about it.
Right. And we know that the CIA does the drug trafficking and that whole thing with the, Mena, Arkansas, and the, but also the CIA, and the MK Ultra program and all of the survivors that the people that are still in it, that are still programmed, are being used, like, Marilyn Monroe type, infiltrating different government people. And,
the new super soldier I'm the most afraid of or sleeper agent that I'm most afraid of is, I do worry about like the kind of immigration thing, and not because I'm half Mexican. I love Mexican culture. I love Mexican people. I have nothing against anyone south of border. I think all the border shit has always been racist and stupid, you know what I mean? Right. But realistically, we're talking like they are able to program lots of people. So the likelihood that there are a lot of infiltrated people in a lot of these different kind of scenarios that are coming on, it kind of falls in line with like the timeline of the shit they're going to be putting us through, to increase crime waves, to increase all that kind of stuff. So that's my main concern right now, is that you're going to have people that, had specific roles, but you're also just going to have a lot of people that are just meant to, sow chaos and everything like that as part of like end program and stuff. And that's like when I see large influxes of people, to me it just seems like cover, like the past, the border crisis was cover for some sex trafficking shit, you know what I mean? That maybe that's like
and selling the babies. Like they got pregnant women getting on buses and they're just bussing them up. It is like child trafficking.
Most people, if you'd have no idea sex trade, then they just see this as like, oh, they're just helping people, you know what I mean? And I'm like, no, there's no accountability. Like we're watching human trafficking in front of our eyes. Yes, completely. And everyone's just like, you're a bigot, and I'm like, and the U.S. government, these people and what happens to them, it's like, value.
The U.S. government takes them from the border and puts them with like a foster family that'll have a house with like 2 or 3 different males that aren't related, and then this little kid is put in that environment, and of course you got pedophiles paying the people that work for the government who are also pedophiles and have also been compromised through the blackmail of the kiddie porn that we've been talking about all like in this whole hour. I mean, it's just, I mean, once you peel the wallpaper, it's like, whoa, and it just opens up into just holy crap. And it's all overlapping and connected. Like, the main point that you brought was that it's not only necessary for the breaking of the children, it's also it's blackmail, which is true power. Like money gets you so far, but then blackmail past money. Once people don't, I won't do that for any cost.
Just the power wants to say what's up. Like I said,
Hmm?
anything they did to blackmail me, I just tell them, you know, it's like, yeah,
Right,
I had to abuse like my underage cousin. Like I would not have
right,
done it if I hadn't been in a fucked up dissociative state, you know, that
right,
had been created like as a small child, you know, but
right,
it's like, you know, that is the only, but if you're not going to do that, which we know they're not going to, blackmail is
right.
the strongest, you know, hold of loyalty you can have on
Exactly,
people.
exactly. And then thirdly, the money. So they get like, it seems like this is necessary for the satanic like workings of the occult, like crime, organized crime syndicates that work together. This child porn is like a commodity. It's like money, and it creates, you know, jobs, and it creates a purpose for other psychopaths in the cult.
When I talked about the core event, like that's the thing that's a reason I'm here, you know, is when I
Right,
talked about the core splitting event where it was like me and like a few other kids that were getting essentially like traumatized, dissociatively split, you know, to create, you know, sleeper assassin bullshit, you know, or sex slaves or whatever that those other kids' path was. I don't really know what they were
right,
chosen for, you know, like I know what I was chosen for,
right,
but regardless, like when you're going through the lengths to create this, like um you're gonna get anything out of it that you can.
oh right,
Almost, you know.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, they're, I
Sorry.
mean,
Lost my
they're
train of
like,
thought.
they're satanic and they're left brain orientated. And so like they're going to think of all the ways they can benefit from every
Oh,
situation, you know? And so like if they can apply that, like
yeah.
look at, I mean, if you look at how when they destroyed 9/11, like they destroyed the building, they like, you know, it's a new aeon of government. We got all like, you know, and they got to steal a bunch of gold, and they got to shoot up the Pentagon where they were like looking at the money that was missing, and you know they got to have all their war weapons, they creating all this war of terror, you know. It did all these things because it seems to me like that's how they think, that's how they do anything really. And
Yeah.
when you look at your situation,
Well,
that's right. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, and it's how they're getting caught nowadays too. Sorry, I was laughing before, not at what you were saying, but it was just because I was laughing because I had lost my train of thought and then was
Oh, you're
remembered it.
good.
So
No, it's all
I was
good.
just
It's all
like,
good.
yeah, no worries. It's easy to happen when you start talking about like really fucked up things. But
Yeah.
but in any case, you know, that's one thing I wanted to say is like is kind of like you're describing. You know, that's kind of why they're getting caught more and more is because there's psychopaths. They don't have a whole lot of creativity. They like
Right.
coming up with like a certain playbook, you know, like false flag, and then bringing in whatever legislation, whatever it is, you know what I mean?
Right.
They had like having a playbook, repeating it over and over and over with a lot of different iterations, but still it's the same playbook. And
Yeah.
it's the same, you know, and it's the same with me. And that's why I want people to understand, you know, is like when I had talked before about like the, you know, being in a cage, you know, for several days and everything, and that being like a huge trauma event and everything. It's like there was me, a couple other kids that was happening to, and the people that were doing it, like I never saw them again. It's like that was their whole role. It was two guys, you know, that were also dog handlers because that was part of like the abuse and everything. Like, and I guess a third guy that would appear from now and again. But it's literally like, you know, and that's how it felt like is like that this was their job, you know, that they would get a batch of kids in, they would traumatize them in these very systematic ways. You know, you're going to see a girl ripped apart by dogs first. You're going to go through sexual abuse. You're going to hang out in a fucking room with a corpse and be told that you could be left there and forgotten just like that corpse. You know what I mean? More sexual. You know, it's like, it's crazy when you think about how any kid could be put through this, but it's even crazier when you think about the fact that this is like a fucking manual that they have. And it's like, and it's okay, these 3 kids are going through it this week. For all I know, there's another room down the hall where it's happening to another 3 kids. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just going to happen to another 3 kids the next few days once we're out of there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And when you start thinking about things that way, you know, that it's like, it is this playbook. It is this way of just like, you know, it's why they're getting caught, you know, too. And why slaves are able to wake up is people are able to write manuals on deprogramming, because they program us all in pretty much the same ways, you know, to a degree, you know, that it's just a matter of starting to recognize it. But that's also the level of like a factory kind of nature of the child porn to fuel this like underworld network and all this money and everything and all this other stuff they're getting from it. It's like, you have all these incentives of what you're getting from it, you know, and what they have is essentially a playbook of knowing how to achieve it. Like when you're dealing with psychopaths, like you're saying, like, you have an equation, why not? Like, they don't understand why you wouldn't be doing this, you know? So the likelihood, you know, that there is like in the 30 years, that many more victims that are in the same position, you know, it's just crazy, you know? I mean, what we're seeing is, like you're saying, evidence of it now when you see just the volume of pornography that we have on the internet. At a certain point, it shows, it's like a symptom of the problem that I was at, you know, not at the beginning of it because it's been around a long time, but still, I was there, you know, at, you know, where it was 30 years ago, essentially, and seeing, you know, that psychopaths don't change anything. They didn't change anything. If anything, it's gotten more advanced and worse, you know?
Right. They just learn more technical ways and they apply computing and whatever. Yeah, that's how I mean, the just one more thing before we go. I'm getting close to the end of the time. But the nature of pornography itself, it desensitizes the viewer, and they start to see women as an object or the porn. And then some people, from the desensitization,
it makes you see everyone as an object,
or I guess
psychopathy as an object, you know.
Right.
It's doing that mechanism you're talking about.
Yeah, right. And so, like, the more you watch it, the more you need, because like a drug, you become desensitized to it. And these, like, Pornhub and stuff gives you suggestions of like, look at this, like, and so the nature of it is it's a progression, like stepwise, into further demoralizing and BDSM and whatever. Like, if there's somebody that can fall for that, they might fall for that, and then they might not catch themselves, and then they see like, oh, 13-year-old gets pissed on, click, like, you know, and then all of a sudden they're a consumer of
normal. Yeah.
I mean, not normal people, I guess. Not everybody does that. Like, I'm just saying, it creates a scenario where that could happen. What's that?
Yeah. If the person has a lot of abuse and they're on the spectrum of that, then that's a lot more likely to happen. That they're going to get that suggestion, they're going to click on it, and then continue going down that desensitization rabbit hole.
Right. So that would create more demand, and that bolsters the organized criminals who are working as a factory and running these kids through.
The addict.
Right. Yeah, the way that they.
Yeah, so I feel like it's the same with Pornhub.
Right.
They gear the algorithms towards to be using the most, which are the addicts, the people that are already on that spectrum through prior trauma and abuse to be falling for, that addiction. I would argue, that most people that, become sex addicts and stuff are people that fall into that trap, but haven't had the trauma that would put them on a social spectrum where they start really becoming, like you said, digs.
It was a little choppy, but I think I got that whole thing. That was, yeah, like you were saying that the the people that might have had that. Do you have someone there? Are you? Hi there. I'm sorry. I guess I do need to. Oh, sweet. Okay, that's great.
I probably raised some.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I guess. Is there anything that we didn't mention that needs to be said before we go?
I guess no. I mean, I think for the most part, with a subject like this, how can you cover it all? But I think we kind of came to like a good stopping point of being able to talk about, at least trying to give people some indication of like what the snuff porn industry is, I hope. But
right.
Like I had let Sean know, is that if anyone ever has specific questions, or gaps that I can fill in into like understanding anything about what I talk about, like I am more than happy to come on again, and would be happy if like, if you like field some questions or something,
I would love that.
We can do whatever. Yeah. Or the art episode too. I'm excited about that. I think that'll be a intriguing.
I definitely want to do the art thing. Just because you're an artist and I want to see your work, but also because like we can learn so much from it. And so I'll try to work out a way. Yes. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you did show us some of those watercolor, and like that in itself is very like we bring those too. Like I want to see all of it. So that's great. Beautiful. And
awesome.
So please, listeners and viewers, send me an email and ask if you want to ask Carrie about anything, if you want her to maybe explain a little more about what we talked about in the past. That's fine. You can find my email at onegreatworknetwork.com/Sean-McCann. There's a link there. And you can also find the other work that we've done together. She was on episode 88 and 90 of Wake the Dead. And you've also done episodes with Emma Catherine on the Imagination podcast. And you can find those on YouTube as well. And I linked those to our earlier shows. So if you look in the show notes of those, you can find the link to those YouTubes as well. Thank you again.
I should Carrie. Be also posting my page.
What's that? I'm sorry. You should also be posting.
I really appreciate it.
Okay. Right. Sorry, it's getting a little choppy. Well, you're very welcome, and I'm very happy to have you here. And I look forward to the next one. Thank you so much for offering for more. This is wonderful for me and for the listeners as well. I've gotten a lot of good feedback, and people have said they admire how strong you are and how much you've healed. And you're really an example for other survivors that they can find healthy, beautiful life. And I'm so glad that you're living that and speaking the truth to others, teaching them all that you're doing with Desert Dakini. I hope everybody visits that on YouTube. And thank you again so much, Carrie.
Thank you, Sean. It's great talking again.
Wonderful. Well, we will catch you next time. And thank you for listening to Wake the Dead.